Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is number 4 in a 4-part series called Four Buddhist Paths to Happiness and Well-Being. And as I've started out with each one of these, let's see if I can get the slideshow going. Each one of them presents sort of a radically different take on Buddhism. They're all Buddhist paths. And in fact, there's an essential set of beliefs or attitudes or discoveries which underlie all the different Buddhist paths. But over Buddhism's gigantic history, it's been around for about 2,500 years, it has actually adapted itself to many different cultures and to, frankly, different levels of understanding our own human situation and the nature of our experience, the nature of the universe. That's adapted itself. There's a series of almost levels of understanding in Buddhism. And these 4 paths are an attempt to sort of outline that for everybody. As I've said many times, this isn't a meditation course, although each one of the paths I'm describing a characteristic kind of meditation, which I really encourage you to undertake, that sort of sum up, it's the perfect expression of, it's sort of the philosophical underpinning for each one of these paths or understandings. So as I said, it isn't really a course in meditation, and I'm not a scholar, so it's not really a scholarly overview of Buddhism, which is hugely complex. It's attempt to be sort of a map or a guide, and my hope is to pass on some of the things I've been taught and to give people an overview of this beautiful and very profound path of spirituality to help you in your own meditation, whether you're a Buddhist or, frankly, if you're not. There are some things about Buddhism which are very much like traditional other forms of spirituality, and there's a lot of aspects of Buddhism that are totally unique. So here's a list of the 4 classes. We're in the 4th one, the Path of the Great Perfection, which you'll hear quite a bit about in a little bit later. And I'm also, because of my daughters helping me, I've uploaded 3 of the talks so far, and I'm going to upload this one. And I'm also making the PowerPoint, the set of notes available to everyone who's taken this course. So here is the Path of the Great Perfection. And you see, you'll remember that in each one of these talks, I've given sort of an emblem, a sort of a symbol for each talk. And I think for the very first talk, you saw a wheel. For the very first one. The second one, you saw sort of a depiction of a Buddha, the kind of image of the Buddha that we've all been familiar with. The third one, you saw a strange tantric deity from the Vajrayana tradition in Tibetan Buddhism. And now you see this. It's seen as a symbol or a letter. It's almost to be understood as a mantra. It's an utterance. It's ah. It's a little bit like the Tibetan version of the Om. But this is sort of a quintessential depiction of what we're going to be talking about today, the Great Perfection. And you'll get a better idea later on. I've been giving a quick summary of all the preceding talks at the beginning of each one of these talks, because my hope is to really help you remember all this stuff. And repetition is one of the ways we learn, and it's very traditional in Buddhism. You almost recapitulate the whole teaching from the beginning each time you present these teachings. And I'm presenting not my own opinions. These are Dharma as best I can possibly recreate it in terms of my own understanding and in terms of my own background. So there's 4 principal approaches. They're the Hinayana, the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, and the Dzogchen. And they all share certain core understandings, teachings of the Buddha, which I'll be going over with briefly. They each developed historically, loosely in sequence. In other words, the Hinayana is the original teachings of the Buddha as best they've been passed down to us. The Mahayana is the great flowering of the development of Buddhism practice and philosophy in the when Buddhism was dominated the Indian subcontinent. It was about in the Indian Middle Ages, about 1,000 years ago. The Vajrayana, which is the diamond vehicle, which is Tantric Buddhism, and represents a fusion of some of the developing traditions of Indian Tantra and Buddhist philosophy for a unique practice-oriented kind of exposition on Buddhism. And finally today, Dzogchen, which is, I'll save up a little bit, talk later on. Dzogchen is both a Indian development. It's Dzogchen because it's associated with a Tibetan practice, but it's in a way a sort of a universal practice. And I'll talk about it later on. Each one of these paths accomplished the goal of Buddhism, which is the solution to the perennial problem, the human condition, that all of we human beings, and in fact all conscious beings, experience difficult and suffering, and they can't seem to achieve a lasting and permanent happiness. That's the essential problem which Buddhism addresses. Buddhism, it's not my idea, it's been taught by others, it has something for everybody. It's such an elaborate and subtle and complicated set of practices and also set of understandings and philosophies that have been evolved that it appeals, one aspect or another appeals to everyone. You'll find yourself in the course of my talk and in the course of your own practice, without even being aware of it, addressing yourself to one or another set of issues in Buddhism. You can't really do it all at once. The first path that we talked about in my first talk was the path of what the Mahayana people have called the Hinayana, or the small vehicle. It's associated with the Theravadan Buddhist teachings that are now practiced largely in Southeast Asia. Some of the words associated with this is insight meditation, the forest tradition, Thai forest tradition. They are associated or considered to be direct inheritors of the original teachings of the Buddha, which is called the Tipitaka, or the Pali Canon. Why is it called the Pali Canon? Because actually Tibetan was an oral tradition, passed down orally for generation after generation of monks until, Buddha was practicing about 480 to 5 something before the Common Era, about 2,500 years ago. And they weren't really written down until about a few hundred years after his death. The Hinayana, or the original teachings of the Buddha, were very much a monastic ideal. And it is a monastic, a renunciate path. It's based on the renunciation, or the giving up of ordinary worldly desires and the retirement from ordinary worldly activities, like having a career, a family, that kind of thing, and also participation in societal needs. It's a retirement actually into a monastery, or earlier on into the forest, to live with other monks or monastics in a spiritual community called a sangha, devoted to the cultivation of virtues and the elimination of negative mind states. Negative mind states, obviously, selfishness, greed, anger, fear, things like that. In return, this ideal fosters wisdom and loving mind states and virtue, and it does so by the focus on the mind. A real distinctive aspect to me of Buddhism is that it is not a theology. There is no concept of an external deity. There's no concept of your life being ruled by the fates or being ruled by something outside of yourself. You are responsible ultimately for your own well-being and your own happiness. You are the one who are responsible for your own unhappiness and confusion in your present state. As part of that, when Buddha was enlightened, after his great experience of enlightenment, that's part of the legend of the Buddha, he was approached by another renunciant, another forest ascetic on a roadway. And they asked him, "Who are you?" Because he was radiant. I've seen these I've seen high-level teachers, and they were radiant people. He was radiant. I said, "Who are you? Are you some kind of a god? Are you a divine being?" And he says, No. He says, "I'm simply awake." And that is the term of that we've gotten of the Tathagata, which means, or Tathagata, which is the thusly arrived one, the one who is totally present, or it also means the Buddhi, the awakened, the enlightened state. He was fully present, fully aware of what life was. The Buddha said that he had discovered the secret, the great secret to human happiness, and also why human life is so difficult. And he summarized this in the very famous Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth that we talked about extensively is that life is unsatisfactory. It's temporary, it's frustrating. There's always a lot of unhappiness. We're happy temporarily, but people we love are not happy, or they're happy and we're not happy, or we're happy, but we aren't happy for very long before we want something else to be different. So why is this? He said the second noble truth was that we crave. We're constantly filled with desires for things that we feel that we don't want, that we want, we need, like we want to be happy. We need more money. And we crave to be free of things that we have, like the fact that we're going to die. We crave to be free of that. Okay, we crave to be free of suffering. So we're craving. To attachment means is some part of us feels like this is essential for our well-being. That means that we're attached to it. So the Buddha said, well, the third noble truth was, he said, that is not an inevitable state of, being. We can overcome this. You can actually experience the extinction of that restless craving and desire. How? That was the fourth noble truth. He says you can achieve it by practicing the Eightfold Path. He said the Eightfold Path will lead to nirvana, which is defined as the extinction of personal craving, and an experience of ineffable bliss, well-being, and satisfaction. I read recently a wonderful explanation of what nirvana means. It doesn't mean being high and in a blissful state. You can get high in a blissful state from a couple of bottles of beer, but it won't last. You can also get in blissful states from certain kinds of meditations, and I welcome you to do so, but they don't last. What is a permanent, unchanging sense of inner well-being, inner harmony, inner happiness? That's nirvana, the extinction of unhappiness. So the Noble Eightfold Path, on which all of Buddhism rests, have three components. One is three of the Noble Eightfold Paths. Three of them are concerned with ethical conduct, sila. And we talked about this a great deal, about right action, right speech, and right livelihood. The second group is concerned with disciplining the mind. Fundamental, axiomatic to Buddhism is the notion that everything proceeds from your mind. Not your mind, but the mind. It is, it's not out there. It's not a function of fate or astrology or the deity. It's your own understanding, which is causing your own feelings of happiness or dissatisfaction. So how to discipline, how to educate, how to liberate the mind, all right? Because the suffering is entirely in the mind. I'll hopefully go over that later. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. You can review the notes for what those are about. And finally, how do you achieve deep, lasting happiness? It's through wisdom, dana, right understanding and right thought. The Buddha is motivated totally out of altruism. Okay, he did not have a notion, and people who have experienced nirvana do not have a notion of personal needs and personal self. Everyone is linked, inextricably linked together. It's a collective sense of well-being, a worldly sense of well-being. Goals of the Hinayana. Development of metta, loving kindness. We talked about that. Mental concentration. Controlling, calming the mind. Creating a joyous state of mind. How to do so? Practice two forms of meditation, which are constant through all the very paths of Buddhism. These get developed, amplified, made more subtle. But one is the path of calming and focusing the mind. That's shamatha, calm abiding meditation. The other one is the development of the kinds of insights, not necessarily intellectual, but understandings that come out of meditation. That's vipassana, the insight aspect of meditation. And then I've talked about the goal of nirvana and peace. And finally, the one who's achieved this, and there were many of them in Buddha's time, and there are many of them now around among us, are arhats. Those are people that no longer are subject to this endless drama of personal suffering. When we practice meditation, especially in this Hinayana tradition, there is a wonderful set of teachings called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, well worth looking into. The first one is the core of contemporary movements. If you go to Vipassana retreats or mindfulness-based retreats, they always will start you out with a simple focusing, calming exercise where you watch the breath in meditation. And that is a foundation. The Buddha gave us specific instructions on how to practice following the breath. I don't have time to go into it now, but let's just say we did that during our first course, my first talk together. I gave a basic shamatha-based meditation practice. But there's other aspects of the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, and you can practice these, and you should practice these, whether you're meditating or not, in everyday life. One is to become very aware of, conscious of, pay attention to the variously constantly changing moods and sensations of the body. All right? And I'd love to spend more time talking about that, but it is a quick way to calm you down and ground you. You know that expression, to be grounded, like you're spaced out, you're anxious, you're upset, or you're just exalted, or you need to be reality-based. They bring you back, it's like touchy-feely, bring you back into this present experiential body right now, in the body. Second thought is to become aware of your mind states, constantly changing, like the weather, your emotions, your moods, your feelings, your mental states. If you would like a quick way, let's say you're feeling anxious or you're feeling depressed, quick way, like a quick dose of aspirin, simply say, oh, I'm feeling very, what? Depressed, anxious. Oh, I'm feeling anxious. You'll instantly create a slight distance and you realize, oh, this is just another passing mood. Don't get too knocked off base by it. Wait for it to go away. It's like a headache. Third one, contemplation of dharmas. All of your ideas, beliefs, thoughts, conceptions, memories, visualization, and imaginations, constantly changing. None of them are fixed. Please don't train yourself to be aware of, oh, that's what I believe. That's an idea that's in me. It's not objectively real. To say so-and-so walked into the room is an objective observation, perfectly neutral. To say, oh no, not that person again. You've added on quite a bit to it, haven't you? You created a story around it, okay? Just be aware that you've done that. And automatically you can remember, that person over there, that's someone who I'm projecting certain ideas on. This is very liberating and very deep. I suggest you spend many years, maybe the rest of your life, practicing the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. I'm trying, and I still need lots of work on it. The second great path that we talked about in my second talk is the Mahayana, the great vehicle. Why is it so called? The Hinayana is ultimately for monastics, really. I mean, a lot of lay people are practicing it. Don't get angry at me, but in its foundations, it was a monastic path. The Mahayana involved priesthood, religions, teachings that were for everyone. Even people who weren't going to practice meditation particularly well were comforted by some of the beliefs and some of the explanation provided by what became very large religious institutions. And there are many, many of them. And these all began to expand during the Indian monastic, medieval period in India. They evolved into gigantic communities of scholarly monks. And one famous one was Nalanda. And this is apparently the ruins of Nalanda. I found it on the internet. All right. It evolved many different religions and philosophies of Buddhism, including some of the best known forms of Buddhism. In fact, most forms of Buddhism are one or another kind of the Mahayana. Zen, Chan, which is Chinese form of Zen Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism is very much a Mahayana-based Buddhism, and many other devotional religious forms of Buddhism, such as Pure Land and Amida Buddhism. Those are ones you're probably not as familiar with, but they involve a kind of religious practice, worship, praying to deities, which is, some people would argue, is not really part of the original Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist ideal, but people have needs for this. And it is a on the way to a deeper understanding, as preparations for deeper understandings. What are some of the main ideas of the Mahayana, which is important to know about? The Bodhisattva ideal. The idea that there are people or perhaps semi-divine beings whose total motivation is something called bodhicitta, or awakened or aroused mind, a mind of deep compassion, and the goal of trying to save not only yourself, but all beings lost in this ocean of suffering. You've dedicated yourself to the well-being of all beings suffering, all forms of delusion. You've pledged to do your best to eradicate. It developed the idea of an underlying nature, Buddha nature, Tatthagarbha, which is shared by all sentient beings, share this underlying awareness, this underlying beingness, which is the Buddha nature. Developed the idea of two truths. There is the absolute way things truly are, and the relative reality. I'll talk about it a little bit later because it's very important to understand or get an analogy of why there are two different approaches to reality. Mahayana emphasizes that you cannot be wise without being completely and deeply compassionate, and to be completely true compassion, not pity, but true compassion, true empathy, true understanding of the suffering and the needs of all sentient beings is itself wisdom. It can't be separated. All right? It's also understood that in the Mahayana, then enlightenment, not necessarily nirvana. Nirvana is considered a way station, one of the things you experience on the way towards complete enlightenment. And it's understood that it may take you many, many, many lifetimes to achieve such. So I was talking about the Mahayana, some of the principal ideas of the Mahayana, and it is a very philosophically based religion. Rather, set of practices and religions. I talked about the Bodhisattva ideal and bodhicitta. I talked about the Buddha nature, which was the fundamental idea that all beings possess some kind of essential enlightened nature, which they can realize, they can become reawakened to. I talked about the two truths, very important to understand it. I'll go into it later. I talked about the union of compassion and wisdom. And finally, that the Mahayana assumes that total enlightenment, nirvana, you might achieve in this life. For temporarily, it's not difficult actually to achieve nirvana for temporary purposes, for temporary reasons. In deep states of meditation, you can achieve nirvana. To have it permanently, a little bit more work on your ethical quality, your development of concentration, and your feelings of deep wisdom. But you can still achieve nirvana. But enlightenment for all sentient beings, that's a longer process. Nevertheless, the Mahayana came up with the idea that there are 4 essential insights which mark any kind of Buddhism, no matter how far afield or how different it might look. And these are essential concepts for you to know, to be aware of what Buddhism is all about. One is anicca. That's impermanence. And I spent a long time talking about this in one of the permanent meetings. It's actually the secret to wisdom and the notion that nothing lasts. Witness computer connections, everything compounded out of different events coming together, like a sunny day is based on, the sun, a good mood, a blue sky. All these things come together to make a temporary state called a sunny day or a computer talk. All right? Anything compounded out of parts, like computers, like internet connections, are always subject to change and slow decay and reformation in different forms. Nothing stays the same. Okay, the other one is dukkha. All ego-conditioned experiences are ultimately painful and unsatisfying. Anything that you have is based on 2 things. A sense of an individual ego sense that's separate from everything else, okay? And the sense that of tanha, of thirst, of the need for things to be different. You can't quite be happy with how things are. All of these ego-tinged emotions, experiences, thoughts, everything else is ultimately going to be unsatisfying. That's dukkha. Finally, anatta. There is the non-existent, an independent, separate, and non-enduring self. What the Buddha was addressing here, he said, listen, folks, you guys are convinced that there is a you that is going to reincarnate from life to life to life to life. He said, that's not the case. Buddha's understanding, well, he said, what I look at when I look at what the self is, I see nothing but a series of heaps of different kinds of processes. We would call it like systems. And in fact, neuroscience has no problem with this. I've read, I think you have too, many accounts of where the different senses of self, the I-ness that we have, there's actually a part in the hippocampus or someplace in the central brain which generates the I sense. And I read this, and there's a book called The Buddha's Brain, which is one thing that talks about contemporary neuroscience. The idea that we live in this, our little life, you know, we're going along, we have our jobs, our careers, we have a narrative that we live with it. I read that it's actually part of a little strip of brain up on the top of the head that's creating this ongoing sense of the drama of me. So the Buddha was simply saying that there isn't a unified you which is separate from the world. He says you're a whole series of processes. And just like if you've had a bad night's sleep, you're going to be grumpy. See what I mean? You're not separate from, you know, things that happen to you. You're not separate from your environment. You're not separate from your family. Everything is connected. And you're simply like a whirlwind of processes within all of this. Finally, the nirvana, the sense of the end of craving based on tanha, which I like to define it. You just want things to be different than the way they are. And your sense of delusion, which is your mistaken perceptions of reality. These four marks of Dharma are common to all the different paths of Buddhism. The Mahayana concept of emptiness, which can be very difficult to understand. All right, a lot of misunderstanding. It doesn't mean, emptiness doesn't mean there isn't anything there. All right, it means that everything is there, but in a relative way. There's many ways to understand this. I spent a whole long talk talking about it. I think the quickest way to understand emptiness is to adopt a currently accepted scientific view of reality. Okay, most of us accept the notion that things are made out of atoms and molecules. Okay, all right, we're made out of atoms and molecules. What are atoms and molecules? Well, we know a little bit that they're different levels of energies which are interacting together. Positive and negative energies, you know, protons and neutrons. Beneath that, there are subatomic particles, the weak force and the strong force. We know something about that, that fundamentally everything's based on atoms and molecules, okay? They're based on states of energy, okay? We accept that. What is energy? So you start thinking, what is energy? It's, well, like you have two billiard balls. One billiard ball strikes another one, and the other one takes off. What made that other billiard ball take off? It's a transfer of energy, okay? Energy is intangible, but it makes things happen. But all those things that happen are themselves made out of energy. Maybe the ultimate way of understanding energy is that it's movement. Or to shift the analogy, what is reality? Ultimately, it's colored light. If light is energy, it's just ultimately just states of energy. So that's a contemporary way of understanding. Even though we look around us and we have our friends, we have our families, we have our jobs, ultimately, this is all emptiness. It's just states of energy. Okay. The Buddhists say, don't mix them up. Just because things are states of energy doesn't mean you have to go to work and it means you should be nice to people. That doesn't change that. That's relative reality. Very important. But underneath that is this absolute sense of reality. Anyway, the doctrine, a central text or teaching within the Mahayana tradition is the Heart Sutra. It is the distillation of a much larger teaching called the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Study the Heart Sutra now, study it for the rest of your life. It's very profound and it's chanted in Buddhist, many different kinds of Buddhist temples, many different Buddhist practices all over the world have practice and chant the Heart Sutra every single day. And it's that profound, that important. The heart of the Heart Sutra is form is emptiness. Everything you look at are ultimately just colored light. But emptiness is no other than form. How does colored light express itself? As you and me. We're colored light is us. Okay? No need to get too upset about what happens because ultimately it's colored light. But isn't it wonderful that everything does happen because it happens miraculously out of colored light. Enlightenment of Mahayana Buddhism. The ideal is to become a bodhisattva in your practices in the Mahayana. A bodhisattva is a being which has totally reoriented its existence towards the well-being of others. You don't distinguish your well-being from the well-being of all other sentient beings. All physical forms are void of separation, nothing separate from anything else. You can understand that on all kinds of levels, from ecological, ecology, all the way up to this sort of sense that interdependent arising, which I discussed one day, which is the notion that there's no way you can separate stuff from all the causes and conditions which has allowed it to arise. Okay? All beings are enlightened together. There's no such thing as an individual you. How could you be enlightened? Everything has to be enlightened for anything to be enlightened. That's a Mahayana understanding. It's very profound. Finally, the four immeasurables, another Mahayana approach to wisdom, is the Brahma Viharas. It's actually, forms of this are included in Hinduism and other religious traditions as well. These are Buddhist virtues, but they're more like, how could we talk about the state of mind of a bodhisattva? What would be a feature of the kind of imagination, the kind of being that you would have? Well, loving and kindness and benevolence, all the way from just being nice to cats and dogs, all the way to a gigantic universal compassion of a Buddha. Right? Loving kindness and benevolence. The other one is compassion. The difference is loving kindness is your instinctive desire to be gentle and kind to other beings. You feel that way towards all beings, including ones which we might find quite horrific. You feel kind and benevolent. Compassion is a deep understanding, empathetic understanding of other beings' suffering. There's empathetic joy. Your joy is other beings' joy. And when you experience virtue and joy in the world, you're automatically joyous. What makes you happy is when other beings are happy. A contrast where there's some suffering beings that are happy when other beings are unhappy. You're happy when other beings are happy. Equanimity is unfrappable poise. Balanced. You are not particularly knocked out by things that are scary. You're not particularly knocked out by things that cause ecstasy or great pleasures. Everything to you has a beautiful and calm evenness. Okay? The six paramitas, another concept that how does the mind what can you work on? How does the mind of a bodhisattva work? The five paramitas, these are considered gradations in difficulty. Okay, the first one is generosity, dana. Give a dollar bill to, the homeless person on the corner, all the way to the ability that you have given up your life now and for all future lifetimes towards the well-being of others. All to different levels of dana or generosity, ethical behavior, a deep commitment to, and an instinctive practice of. You wouldn't harm other beings because it's just not in your nature to do so. That's the kind of discipline you're trying to develop. Patience is part of a paramita considered, all the way from the ability to put up with frustration, pain, or difficulties with kind of happy, well-being, devotion towards people, the ability to put up with things, and also to wait for things to happen, okay? Finally, diligence. That is actually joyous diligence. It's finding joy in working hard, selfless dedication towards virtue and the well-being of other beings. The next great paramita is concentration, the control, the discipline of the mind, and focus leading to stages of samadhi. I saw an email from a friend of mine saying, I don't know whether I'll ever achieve some kind of samadhi. Yeah, but that's kind of nonsense. There's levels to it. It simply means to be able not to have the mind constantly running off to different kinds of this or that or the other. The mind's able to stay calmly focused on one kind of endeavor, okay? Finally, prajna. All of these kinds of other sort of the paramitas lead to insight into the differences and the similarity between absolute and relative reality. It's that important a concept. Karma and reincarnation. I want to get going on a little faster here. I talked a great deal about what karma is and what it isn't. The part of Buddhism, which is difficult, I think, for the Western imagination to really grasp, is this notion that moral actions have consequences commensurate with their kinds of activities. Buddhism is founded on intentionality. All right. It's, for example, if somebody steals something and you think, well, you know, as long as nobody knows about it, who's going to care? That's not the way it works. Your intention, your own mind, you know, is affected by your acts of kindness or generosity or moral virtue, and it's also affected by your acts of cruelty or malice or other sort of non-virtuous actions. Intention has a moral character in Buddhist philosophy. What is considered good is what tends towards the general well-being and happiness of others. What is bad? What tends towards the general unhappiness and unwell-being of others. Very simple. Okay? So what reincarnates in karma is your general, I said karma is not, I don't want to, it's too hard to talk about karma. Let's just say it's not about one for one, just because you did a really bad deed, one bad deed is not going to lead inevitably right away to a corresponding bad effect. It's a state of probabilities. It's like you develop a good character, and that will carry over into a subsequent existence of a being in more favorable circumstances. Okay? Especially favorable circumstances of the practice of virtue. By the way, it might, if you develop a very altruistic, loving, kind, bodhisattva nature, okay, you might incarnate in a situation that by the force of your own intention, I want to help others. You might incarnate in a situation where there's plenty of others to help. So it not necessarily leads into some situation where you're very going to be surrounded by pleasures and well-being. That might happen. But it might happen because of the force of your motivation, you incarnate in a situation where you're really needed. Think about that. All right. Rebirth is usually an automatic process. You are just the force of your own karmas. Create the next existence for you. The best analogy I've heard is that in everyday life, as you're driving to work, as you walk through the door, as you meet somebody, each one is a very different kind of set of experiences. Okay? They're all influenced by your basic vast cloud of karmas. Create each subsequent encounter. They say that's what the rebirth is going to be like. Just your next existence showed up, predicated on the kinds of moral decision makings that you're making right now. The next path that I talked about in my last talk is the diamond vehicle, called the swift vehicle, the vehicle of perfections. It was a tantric vehicle. Tantra was a set, Tantra just means scriptures or writings. Tantras originated in India. They mark sort of a, Tantra marks sort of a transition from the ritual and scholarly theory of the Mahayana to a personalized tantric practice that involves a relationship between you, a few other initiates, a little like the monastic ideal, and a guru or master teacher. Okay? It is the pursuit of what is considered the truth of reality. All right, which is real and indestructible, because remember, everything is impermanent except for this truth, this unchangeable truth. One of them being that everything is impermanent, how to really understand that. It's the core of Tibetan Buddhism. In the vast diaspora, the change when Buddhism basically, during the Muslim invasions in the Indian Middle Ages, Buddhism was largely extinguished in the Indian subcontinent, not completely, but largely. And it spread throughout all Southeast Asia. And ultimately, it's been spreading through the world. So one of the forms that got spread was the Vajrayana, this emerging tantric Buddhism. That became the core of the teachings of Buddhism in Tibet. Okay? The Vajrayana doesn't contradict it. It's actually considered part of the Mahayana. And it draws on all those basic truths, which I won't go through. But those are the basic truths you should have a little bit of a feeling for right now. Okay? It differs a little bit from the Mahayana in an intense emphasis on ritual and on the guru relationship. Okay, and I'm going to talk about what there. Oh, before I get that, the two truths doctrine, which I've already addressed a little bit: conventional relative and ultimate absolute reality. Conventional truth is consensus reality, common sense notions. But ultimate truth is reality as viewed by an awakened, enlightened mind. The enlightened mind sees sunyata, form, as emptiness, but it also sees emptiness as form. The two are inseparable. What does that help you to do? It helps you see the real nature of what's going on with you and what's going on with the beings around you. Not your fantasies about what's going on, but what's really going on. The perfect awareness and discrimination between the absolute and relative levels of reality leads to the unity of wisdom and compassion, and that's enlightenment. Okay? It's so important to understand this, because the question comes up, why would emptiness have anything to do with compassion? Let me leave it like this, because I want to get on to Dzogchen today. That's the nut. That's the whole thing for you to really understand in your spiritual practices. The two things are conjoined. When you begin to understand them, you're well on the way to developing wisdom. Okay? True compassion for other beings cannot be separated from true understanding of what emptiness or relative interdependent arising is all about. It's the heart of the Mahayana. In fact, that's what the Mahayana is, in a nutshell, is that idea right there. So I talked quite a bit about the difference and the complementary relationship between shamatha, which is calming, ordering the mind, making the mind a hospitable tool and not something which drives you crazy. And finally, vipassana, which is your developing and increasing insight into what the nature of reality is all about. Without vipassana, there is no prajna, which is the term for deep meditative wisdom or insight into the nature of reality. Without this union of shamatha and vipassana, no enlightenment is possible. You will simply continue on your ideas about what reality is and who you think you are for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Nothing will really change. You'll simply shift the contents around. This life, you might be someone who lays bricks. Next life, a mother. Next life after that, a dictator. Next life after that is somebody who treats people wonderfully. Next life after that, it'll just keep going on and on and on. Your way of developing, becoming a larger, gentler, more harmonious being is entirely related to this marriage between shamatha and vipassana, which is best achieved through kinds of meditation. And it's also achieved through what is called in the Mahayana tradition, and was taken over by the Vajrayana tradition, called upaya, or skillful means. What are these? They're called skillful means because they are not dogmas. These are not treated like rituals that you must do in order to get into heaven. They're treated like skillful ways of working with our emotions, with our own ignorance, and with our own pain. And finally, with all our love, with our hopeful, ambitious feelings for things. What are ways we can best utilize this stuff, the stuff of what we are? We use it in these various, ritual liturgies, mantras, meditations. All of them are considered just skillful means. They themselves don't have an intrinsic great value. There's a quick story that popped in my mind. In Japan, after the Second World War, a couple of GIs were visiting a very high-level abbot of a Zen monastery, deeply realized being. And these two GIs looked at this big statue of a Buddha, and they watched the Zen master bowing to Buddha. And what was the Buddha represent? Represents enlightened awareness and deep compassion. He was bowing to it over and over again. And they looked at him with puzzlement, and they said, is that a god? He said, no. Well, then why are you bowing to it? And the GI said, I could spit at that Buddha. And the Zen master just looked at them with great kindness. And he said, that's all right. You spits, I bows. See the difference in that kind of mind? See the difference in the mind? That's what we're talking about here, developing that. Skillful means. So let me go on and talk about the Buddhist Tantra includes ritual and meditation practice, mantras, we talked about this last time, dharanis, which is recitation of specific liturgies. I have many friends and I myself who've recited certain kinds of prayers or rituals over and over and over again to recondition the mind. Mudras are sacred symbols, okay? Ritual implements, mandalas, visualizations. Again, I want to get going here. We talked all about this last time. It's very extensive, bewildering, but also very seductive. Remember I held last time, I had up a little called a dorje or a vajra. I had a little vajra, I don't have it. And then I had a bell, and I said it represented emptiness, and one side represented wisdom, and the other side represented wisdom and skillful means. There's different kinds of pairings of symbolic use of ritual implements. There's energy practice, kundalini and chakra work, which I said is quite a deep study, and ritual worship that may include meditational deities. There aren't gods you worship. They're skillful means, and you worship deities because it is a way of understanding specific meditational attitudes, understandings, and states of mind. That's what ritual deities in Tibetan Buddhism and in Buddhism is about. The original Buddha, as far as we know, did not worship deities. In fact, was a little against some of the deity worship that was going on at the time, which tended to be a little bit like animistic worships, idol worship. And it's not what it's about. You're not, if you want to get magic by worshiping some statue somewhere, that's not what it's about. It's developing a deep state of wisdom by contemplating what that statue represents. Okay, Samaya, tantric study is very much about a deep and sacred relationship between yourself and the teachings, and yourself and the teachings as exemplified in the Guru. So these are extensions of when you became a monk in the original Buddhism, you also took extensive monastic vows. And there are still, in Mahayana Buddhism, there are lay vows, just a couple like non-harm, non-killing, don't drink intoxicating substance, things like that. And then there are an enormous number of vows and strict rules for monastics, okay? So Samaya vows in tantric practice grow out of the idea of promising to engage in certain forms of conduct, okay? The specific vows depend on the practice and the kind of deity practice that you've been initiated to. In order to participate in Vajrayana practice, you should have received a specific invitation and initiation, which gives something called an empowerment. It creates the mental environment for you to be successful in tantric practice, okay? It's magic in the sense that it involves a willing dedication of yourself and a willing relationship with the Vajrayana teachings, the Guru, and specifically the mandala practice. You have to engage in a deep, deep agreement between the two of you. And again, I talked about last time, the Vajra master, much misunderstood. They had a big, saw on television program the other day, something with Rajneesh, who's an Indian teacher, somebody talking about abuses this Rajneesh did as a spiritual teacher. Yes, the tantric relationship with a spiritual teacher is often misunderstood and sometimes misused and is not to be engaged in very lightly, all right? Vajrayana Buddhism deals with transmission, which is the transference of understandings, not just knowledge, but understandings, perceptions of reality from someone with a superior state of wisdom to your own. It's said in the Vajrayana practices that the goal is ultimately for your mind and the mind of the Guru, not the particular person, but the wisdom that person represents. For your mind and the wisdom mind of the Guru to become the same. All right? So much misunderstood, but very important in the Vajrayana is the Vajrayana relationship with your Guru. By the way, you can have I'm functioning right now partly as a professor, partly as your spiritual friend. Okay, that's another level. The other one is to be actually a spiritual friend is a Kalyanamita. Okay, and the next one after that is the Vajra relationship, and that's a much deeper, much profounder relationship, and that's not something very many of us have. And I talked last time about yidam practices, a meditational deity called a yidam. Usually, I like this term. Yidam means the sacred bond with this wisdom mind, joining together with wisdom mind. It is not worshiping idols. Okay? Yidams are very important. I tried to explain last time, when you really get into a yidam deity, one that's personal to you, they become alive because the wisdom energy that they represent, that's alive in you. It just becomes associated with this outside being. And it's not so weird. Let's say you're in love with someone. Are you really in love with that person? Or is it that you are in love with love and you project that onto that person? I'll repeat that. Are you really in love with that particular person? Or are you in love with love and that gets projected onto the other person? Think about it. It's all about the mind. It's all about the mind. The deity is a manifestation of your basic being. It is the psychological manifestation of enlightened mind in a form that you can relate with. It will show up in a form that's meaningful for you because it ultimately echoes you. It ultimately is you in an idealized form. So this is all Vajrayana. And I talked about Nundro. It's 2 o'clock, so I want to get on with here. Nundro is the culmination of Vajrayana practice. Nundro's got 2 aspects to it. Nundro simply means preparation for. It's literally, you start with a raw, unconditioned mind, like you're going to be an athlete. You start out with some basic exercises to get the mind into shape. Some of them are Vipassana and Shamatha meditation. It's assumed that you've already been doing Shamatha and Vipassana meditation and have developed some initial wisdom insight and have certainly gone a long ways towards calming and ordering your mind, and you're able to concentrate. You're not completely at the whim and the victim of your emotions. You've conquered a lot of that stuff. So the preliminary practices, the common ones are to, when I say karmic deeds and accumulate merit, merit simply means, I'm going to call it conditioning. Conditioning the mind to be more receptive towards spiritual energy or spiritual grace. And karmic deeds, of course, is all of the mixed up notions you have about stuff that are floating around in your consciousness. They are conditioning your consciousness. If you rob somebody back in the 6th grade, trust me, somewhere in your subconscious, that misdeed is still there and is still conditioning your present behavior. If you don't believe me, you haven't done much spiritual work. All of that garbage will come up in the mind while you've been doing your spiritual work. They're all karmic stuff. They're lodged in the subconscious. Okay? And finally, Nundro, the common preliminary practices, and then the extraordinary. The common preliminary practices are, I went through it a great deal last time. I'm going to actually move on here. Look at your notes from last time. The generation completion stages, briefly, is something which is very bewildering to non-Vajrayana people, is this idea of meditating on mandalas that contain meditational deities and memorizing them. Well, it has a tremendous effect on focusing and calming the mind, and it eventually will slowly convert your mind into the wisdom mind of that deity. Tara practice, that we talked about last time. Fearlessness, tremendous compassion, tremendous desire to heal your own self and heal the other beings around you. You can gradually condition your mind to become more Tara-like by focusing on Tara. So generation is generating a visual internal image. And you simply meditated, and meanwhile reciting the mantra associated with this deity. Om Tara Tutari Ture Soha is the mantra of Tara. And the completion stages, that's generation stage. I mentioned some common tantric deities which focus on different, Yamatanka, for example. Yamatanka is the god of death. That's that one right there. And helps you become aware of what death is and what it isn't. All right, Vajrayogini, I talked about that. Anyway, focusing on your yidam. It's used as a means or goal of transformation towards obtaining a mind of full enlightenment. And as I completely experience these things are emanations of my own mind, but not my little personality mind, some deeper layer of mind. Ultimately, they are Buddha nature, as I myself have personified Buddha nature. I just gave you a little advanced teaching. Visualization practice. We actually practiced that last time. We did an elaborate visualization of Tara. If you couldn't attend the last class, please look at the posting of the PowerPoint and the recording of it so you can see how we do it. You can do it in a stage like at the Tibetan Buddhist Center that sort of everyone practices it that way, and then you can do it in a very advanced level. And finally, energy body, I've talked about that, is how we use with chakras and the inner energies of the body to work with our spirituality. This is one way, well, a teacher of mine put it, real spirituality happens below the neck. It's not something you think up. It's not theory. It's something you actually learn. It's like the difference between reading how to ride a bicycle and actually doing it, or reading about something art form like painting, and then actually painting enough to really understand what painting is about. All right? And the three kayas, I'm trying to get on to the next practice. I talked a lot about what that represents. Very important to understand these things, part of the Vajrayana teachings. They are different aspects of enlightened mind. Basically, underlying absolute nature of reality, the unity of absolute and relative reality is the Dharmakaya. Sacred expression, ultimately, everything you hear, understand, and know, okay, about reality, ultimately is a sacred understanding in an enlightened state of mind. The Nirmanakaya, everything that you see out there in the world, the whole world, is actually a manifestation of a sacred world. And specifically, the Nirmanakaya means the embodiment of enlightened energy in the form of a Buddha or in the form of a guru. You actually can talk to it. It's there. That's the Nirmanakaya. It actually shows up. Form actually emerges out of emptiness. That's the Nirmanakaya. And Tantric path, that's a summation. Okay, and now I'm going to go on to the fourth great path, which is my favorite. All right, it's called Dzogchen in one of the four great schools of Buddhism, of Tibetan Buddhism. The four great schools, Dzogchen is, well, I'll talk about it in a second, but it's also called the Mahamudra. They share very similar purposes, very similar practices, and they're trying to achieve the same thing. Okay, Tibetan Buddhism maintains this tradition. It's considered very difficult, and the summation of all the other previous stages of practice, it's considered very difficult because it's actually radically simple. These practices are considered the final statement of wisdom into the nature of reality and spiritual practice. They don't really conflict with any of the four great seals of Buddhism, with the Eightfold Path. None of that doesn't contradict any of that, but actually completes it. That's why it's called the Great Completion. It gets to the cuts to the chase. The Buddha said everything's a function of mind. So Dzogchen and Mahamudra says, okay, well then let's forget about all this other preliminary practice stuff you've been doing. Let's just look at the nature of mind. Buddha said initially all of it's due to not God or fate or karma. It's all due basically to the nature of your mind, which is ignorant. You don't know what's going on. So Dzogchen and Mahamudra said, fine, everything is mind or consciousness. So let's just explore the nature of mind itself. Let's skip the rest of it. Or let's just incorporate the rest of it, because Dzogchen and Mahamudra both take advantage of Vajrayana teachings, take advantage of Mahayana teachings, and the ethical component, they take advantage of the Hinayana teachings. So Dzogchen is considered part of the Nyingma, the original school of Tibetan Buddhism, very primordial, okay? Mahamudra is considered part of a lineage of the one that I'm been initiated to, the Kagyu, called the practice lineage expression. Two other schools of Buddhism, not opposed to Mahamudra and Dzogchen. In fact, the Gelugpa school, which is the one the Dalai Lama belongs to and is considered the most scholarly of the four schools, that fully embraces the idea of Mahamudra especially. In fact, the Dzogchen school, that's the school in Tibetan Buddhism, that's the school in Tibetan Buddhism, which is emphasizing moral conduct particularly. All four of those schools are use Dzogchen and Mahamudra teachings. The goal of all of us practice, both Dzogchen and Mahamudra, is first to recognize the essential nature of mind. Then the idea is that you develop a very deep, contemplate it. You develop a very good familiarity with the nature of mind. Then finally, you incorporate that view. The true nature of mind becomes everything in your life. Okay? Traditionally, the nature of what your mind really is like is pointed out to you. It's called the pointing out instructions. It's pointed out to you by a guru, by your teacher. And I'm tempted to say more. I wish I had more time. I don't have it, but it was done for me many, many years ago, and it's taken me close to 35 years. I've been developing this essential insight, okay, into what is really going on. When we practice non-distracted resting or relaxing into this mind's essential or true nature, okay, we eventually come to rest in this state of mind, this understanding, this awareness, first with no distractions, and finally, we realize everything is a function of this state of mind, and actually, finally, it becomes effortless. We're not really meditating anymore. It's just who we are. Wow. I don't know if what I'm saying to you sounds a little generalized or mystical. It is mystical, and I have to generalize it a little bit, but it's something in function, in actual real life. It's very concrete. It actually happens. So to help you, I've chosen a couple of great masters of this, okay? The first one is a much beloved contemporary teacher. He was not one of the original Tibetan from old Tibet and the diaspora, but he's actually, I think, a highly respected, highly regarded contemporary Buddhist teacher, very aware of the West and of English and of Western customs and Western understandings. It's commonly understood among the Tibetan Buddhists that Vajrayana is a little weird for we Westerners. Some of us like it. A lot of us just say, this is just too weird, all these deities. I just can't get into it. Dzogchen is eminently suitable, and Mahamudra, eminently suitable for we Westerners. It's totally rational. There's nothing weird about it. It's actually pig simple when you get the hang of it, but getting the hang of it is very difficult. So I'm going to be reading to you from a wonderful short description of Mahamudra, which I found on the Lion's Roar. You can find it on the internet too. This is Panlop Rinpoche, Dzogchen Panlop Rinpoche. So he said, Buddhism is rich in methods for working with the mind. One of the most renowned and the powerful is this ancient wisdom tradition known as the Mahamudra. Originating in India, the view and practice of Mahamudra has gradually spread across Asia and today has reached the West. I think the editorial site is one of the most significant historical developments in the world, is the transmission of Buddhism, and specifically Dzogchen and Mahamudra to the West. I think it will have huge implications for our future, and it's unnoticed in the media, and I'm not surprised at that. As a philosophy, it aims to communicate a clear knowledge of the true nature of the mind. And as a meditation practice, it's designed to bring about that experience swiftly and unmistakably. The true nature of mind, the Buddha nature. The meaning of Mahamudra is found in its name. Maha means great, and mudra means great symbol or seal. The great symbol referred to is the wisdom of emptiness, sunyata, which is the very nature of our mind and of all phenomena. Any object or idea the mind can observe or become aware of. And because it covers the totality of our experience, The great symbol is known as the all-encompassing reality, from which there is no escape and no exception. Everything. Mahamudra is a contemplative Buddhist tradition known for its simplicity. The practice is to be genuine, relaxed, and aware in every situation in life. And it is to accept and appreciate who we are. To engage in its profound methods, we aren't required to change our lifestyle. You do not have to become a monk. You do not have to become a Vajrayana disciple. You aren't required to change your lifestyle. And any message contrary to that is not a true Mahamudra teaching. No fancy Samaya vows. Notice that. No ritual practices. This is why it's very appealing in the West. But it's also seductive because it seems much simpler. It's not so easy to conquer our mind. It's not so easy. The practice of Mahamudra is an experience of our mind that's completely free and joyful, no matter what our life brings us. Cancer, death, the loss of loved ones. Free and joyful, no matter what life brings us. Nirvana, in other words. Liberation. It points to us the mind's true nature. Realizing the true nature of our mind doesn't just happen by accident, pure luck, or willpower alone. We have to rely on the key instructions of the Mahamudra lineage, imparted to us through a trusted and realized teacher. And that way, it's part of the Vajrayana. Mahamudra has a tradition of skillful methods, upaya, for directly pointing out the nature of mind, which is a unique feature of this lineage. If we have the opportunity to receive these instructions and a sincere interest in working with them, we have a good chance of understanding and realizing the Mahamudra wisdom. And some of these techniques in the Mahamudra basically involves instructions on how to look very carefully at how your mind is operating, very detailed on how your thoughts are coming and going, your emotions are coming and going, your perceptions are coming and going. It's like the 4 foundations of mindfulness, remember that? But stepped up a notch and really getting into what actually goes on with you. The wisdom of emptiness. Mahamudra teaches us a number of special techniques for looking at our mind to see its true nature. When we look inside the mind with a clear, steady focus, the mind we see is transparent, spacious, and open. That is the true meaning of Vipassana meditation, insight meditation. When we look inside with a clear, steady focus, the mind we see is transparent, spacious, and open. What does that mean? It feels like there's something there, but whenever we look for it, there isn't anything concrete that we can find. Our thoughts and emotions are very vivid, but we really can't put our hands on them. They melt away as soon as we notice them. All of you who are meditation practitioners have begun to experience this. Those people who meditate every day and have done so for many, 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 many years, like myself, it's remarkable. They melt away as soon as you notice them. Everything's impermanent in right there, and everything out here is impermanent. Everything melts away. As soon as you look at it, it's already gone. Even sights and sounds, which seem to be real and distinct entities, evade our grasp when we search for their true identity. Sasaki Roshi once said, he said, you get to the stage with a bird that you're hearing outside in the tree, you realize that bird is in your heart. You are hearing that bird. You are hearing that bird. It's in your heart. But whenever you grasp its true identity, it's a memory and then it's gone. We recognize the flowing, open, and spacious quality of all experience. Even for a moment, you just had an insight. That's the emptiness side of the wisdom of emptiness. I can't tell you how important it is to understand that. It's liberation. Nothing's binding you. Just your perceptions. Just your beliefs, false beliefs. When we look at our mind, however, we see that it's not just open and spacious. There's a luminous, clear, and creative energy that's the source of our compassion and joy. There's also a quality of wakefulness, of all-encompassing awareness. When we recognize the union of this brilliance, this awareness, and the open, transparent space, that's what we call the recognition of the wisdom of emptiness. That's the true nature of mind. In such a moment, we don't experience just one side of our mind. We experience the wholeness of the mind. We see that it's a union, space and compassion awareness. And that's Mahamudra. I wish I could have you guys experience this right this moment. Maybe some of you have. At this moment, what more way need we seek as the truth eternally reveals itself? This very body is the body of the Buddha. This very mind is the mind of awakening. The line from a Japanese scripture. It's actually, this is the state of nirvana that he's describing. It's accessible for you. This is the state of nirvana. This is a way of understanding the mind of enlightenment, Buddha wisdom or Buddha nature. This wisdom mind is rich in qualities that bring us boundless happiness, insight, and a corresponding desire to help our world, compassion. Right from the very beginning, the minds of all beings have been free of any inherent faults or defects. There's nothing to fix. If we can relax in this moment, we're resting in the ground or the fundamental state of the Mahamudra. The way we rest is through the practice of meditation, which is path Mahamudra. And when we rest very well, we are naturally in union with the goal or fruition of this path. There's no other Mahamudra to obtain. We are the Buddha already, awake and free in its very moment. That's this moment of liberation. Okay? Yeah. Now, the reason I hesitated is it's very common for us to say, oh, I'm feeling liberated. And then you see a campaign commercial with our president on or something, you get all upset. Well, then, no, you are liberated. You're still locked in your reactive, limited mind. This is about being free of all of that. You can still have those reactions, but you look at them and smile at them. They're just stuff, like everything else. When we fail to recognize the basic nature of our mind, then we have a problem. That's what I just described. The luminous creative energy of original mind is misperceived as a dualistic world of me and it, self and other. Confusion arises, clinging begins, and then the whole world of suffering and bewilderment manifests. Instead of enjoying peace, illumination, and happiness, we experience this mind as afflicted with painful emotions. We're bombarded by thoughts that lead us this way and that, and we endure anxiety and fear while we long for peace and contentment. This is very important. That's what we call the spinning of samsara, or cyclic existence, which is endless until we decide it by realizing the mind's true state. I described in one of the talks. The traditional understanding of samsara is actually realms that you incarnate into. And that's either, I don't know, might be true, might not be, but that's the traditional understanding. Dzogchen masters say what samsara actually is just our desire, creating, I got to do this, and gee, wouldn't it be nice about that, and I wish that weren't here, and maybe I should get this, and I think he's right, and no, I don't agree with that, and it should be this way, and I wish it weren't that way. It's just this endless stuff that draws us on and on and on. Oh, about this, and I want that, and oh, what about, and oh, I don't like that. You know, there's endless drawing on. What we call the spinning of samsara, cyclic existence, which is endless until we decide to stop it by realizing the mind's true state. So in the beginning of samsara is when we fail to recognize that ground. And the end of samsara is nothing more complicated than recognizing our own nature of mind. When the mind recognizes itself and can rest freely and relaxed in a state of openness, that is the end of our confusion and suffering. Sounds too good to be true. Well, it isn't, it isn't. It is true. but it's not that easy. It means really getting it. Openness, non-fixation, okay? Awareness, and the fact that everything is part of it, nothing separate from it. Buddha nature. Luminosity, which is the clarity nature of mind, manifests creatively as phenomenon. All this stuff. Because we're habituated to solidifying our experience of this luminous display, it's easier for most of us to see the luminous aspect of mind than to recognize the mind's empty nature. That simply means this: Donald Trump exists only in your mind. All your hopes and dreams exist only in your mind. You make them up. Other people around you may be making them up. You make them up. Why? If you really think about it, it's real, but only in a relative way. It's the union of wisdom and emptiness. Okay? He's saying that we are habituated to solidifying our experience. We believe that's real. All this luminous display, all this stuff that we project from our mind. However, if we're missing the experience of emptiness, we might start thinking of luminosity that something is solid and real for us to hold on to. Oh, I got to do luminosity. Then it becomes a suffering and confusion instead of freedom. It becomes one more little thing that your ego wants to achieve. Oh, I got to be luminous. It's luminous whether you want to or not, because that's what everything is. Everything just shows up as aspects of the Buddha nature. That's what everything is. The luminous nature. To be technical, of the Dharmakaya. It's the Shambhogya aspect of the Dharmakaya. The mind's expression. It's first important to learn what emptiness actually means, at least intellectually, before we jump to the conclusion that the nature of mind possesses all the qualities of enlightenment. Once you have a good understanding of the emptiness nature of mind, then we can further that view by seeing the mind's luminous nature. I agree. Do that. So before undertaking Mahamudra meditation, we should first have a theoretical understanding of the true nature of mind as empty, luminous, and aware. By the way, there's something called analytical meditation, which means trying to figure out. There's nothing wrong with having a good intellectual view. It isn't the same thing as having an experience of the view, but it's a little like one way, well, you can't visit Paris unless you know you're in Paris. Otherwise, you won't know where you were, right? You got to know what's going on first, then you have a deep experience of it, then you really know it. So before undertaking Mahamudra meditation, we should first have a theoretical understanding of the true nature of mind as empty, luminous, and aware. Second, we should understand how confusion develops when we don't recognize that nature. Third, we should understand that the essence of our confused thoughts and emotion is free of inherent negativity or fixation. They are all simply experiences of mind that are empty and luminous. Oh, I wish I could help you guys. Some of you, maybe you really get this. I've spent many years working with this. This is what it's all about. That's all you have to work about. This is the whole thing. That's all that really matters, is getting what this is about. The rest of it is it's fun. You can do it if you want. Why not? Dress up as a monk or worship some statue. Why not? It's fun. It's just the mind's luminous nature. But this is the heart of it. These three aspects of ground Mahamudra are important to understand through the conceptual mind first, then through the process of reflection to make it more experiential, and finally you bring your understanding to complete realization through meditation. In the beginning, the Mahamudra meditation is a process of becoming familiar with the mind just as it is, and then learning how to relax with it. There's nothing wrong with the goofy nature of your mind that you have right now. In fact, it's simply the luminous expression of emptiness. You just don't realize that. You solidify it. You make a problem out of it. You haven't learned that. It's wonderful to find that all this stuff shows up. Our first glimpse is likely to show us that our mind just often wanders aimlessly about. There's little organization to our thinking. It's like a house with junk piled up everywhere. We've all experienced that. And the junk actually gets orderly, but it doesn't never completely goes away. The mind just keeps churning up all this stuff. You have a mountain of karma in there, well, generating itself up. So what do we need to do first? We need to bring a sense of order and clarity to our mind. That's shamatha concentration meditation. Got to do it. No shortcuts. Being more mindful of our thought process, our awareness, naturally becomes sharper, more precise, and more discriminating. Those are the qualities of wisdom or prajna that you develop by practicing shamatha and vipassana meditation. Once we've created some mental space, we can begin to glimpse the mind's nature and the play of its creative energy. And it's amazing. All of this around you, your whole life is just the creation of this emptiness, wisdom, luminosity, nature of the nature of mind. Gradually, we can further let go of the thoughts and labels and judgments that keep our mind moving, unsettled, and tense. And we hurt each other with all of this nonsense that we have. We can begin to relax, accept everything, expand, and inhabit a new dimension of presence and openness. Open to the nature of experience the way it is, instead of constantly trying to fix it or change it or alter it or object to it or subscribe to it or buy more of it. Open to the nature of experience the way it is. This is vipassana, the insight into the nature of reality. Same thing as prajna. There are two main kinds of meditation in the Mahamudra tradition. There's Mahamudra shamatha, or resting in the true nature of the mind, and then there's Mahamudra vipassana, which is this clear sea. The focus of our attention is the mind itself, as opposed to anything external. If you have a background of sitting meditation and are familiar with the practice, then learning to rest in the nature of mind can be very simple, easy, and straightforward. That's why Dzogchen, properly taught, properly understood, with a basis in the other yanas, it's my meditation, and it's a great meditation for people, especially for Westerners. So this is, again, all Punlap Rinpoche. All right. Meditation is Mahamudra, is resting in the nature of mind. We think that to meditate, we have to concentrate, we have to focus on something. But the actual meditation of Mahamudra is not really about that. It's more about knowing how to rest our mind and let it relax in its own nature. That can be very tricky, because on one hand, we need to be mindful and stay present and alert. But on the other hand, we need to let go of any stress and just relax. Some traditions, they call this non-meditation. Meditation, shamatha, which is important, is to concentrate, to focus the attention, to keep it from wandering. This is the thing where you taste totally relaxed, but at the same time, you aren't holding on. You're totally not holding on to anything. You're just there. So the best practice is the middle way, finding a balance between non-distraction and realization. It's like riding a bicycle, my friend. First, you wobble all over the place. First, you fall off. Eventually, become smooth. Finally, you can take your hands off the handles and you just fly. Okay? I think it's pretty an apt analogy to Mahamudra meditation. Effortless relaxation in the mind's nature. We may be worried that we have too many thoughts and we're not relaxed enough, or that our focus is not in the right place. But relaxation is going to come naturally if you keep doing it. That's the key thing, to keep doing it. In the beginning, it may feel artificial, but if we keep doing it, it becomes effortless. In my experience in watching people meditate or trying to learn how to meditate, the thing that everybody does wrong is that they stop meditating. I repeat, the only thing that people do wrong is that they stop meditating. Just don't stop meditating. Do it every single day, twice a day. Do as much of it as you can, regularly. And it's all luminosity, it's all the mindfulness nature. But if you want to get the death grip of your delusion, be free of that, you have to practice meditation. Resting in the nature of mind, the way it really is. So, first take your seat on a cushion or a chair in an upright or relaxed position. Then take a moment to feel the cushion and the posture of your body and the attitude of your mind. I repeat, take a moment to feel the cushion, get grounded, the posture of your body, the attitude of your mind, and the movement of your breath. Become aware, in other words. Sit quietly for several minutes, letting go of your thoughts until you feel a sense of being calm. Then you bring your attention to the eyes and look directly into the space at front. Then relax at ease and rest in the present moment, in nowness, my emphasis. On one hand, there's a sense of focusing on the space, but on the other, there's no particular spot to focus on. The gaze is like space itself, wide and spacious. On the internet, they have Dzogchen Rinpoche, one of the great teachers, died a few years ago. And they simply have on the internet him doing Mahamudra meditation. I've been in the presence of people doing it. It's very powerful. I can't explain what it does, but it's being in the presence of the Buddha mind. And in this tradition, you meditate with your eyes open. I won't try to do it for you. Actually, I did just do it for you. You have your eyes open. Whatever comes up in the present, whatever's there, whether it's a thought or emotion or perception, you just try to meet it without judgment or comment. Many of you, this sounds like beginning meditation instruction, and it is. It's just this time we're really doing it, and we have a better grasp on why we're doing it this way. Don't meet it without judgment or without comment. Just rest in your mind in whatever that very experience is. Whether you regard it to be good or bad or pleasant or unpleasant, there's no need to change it or improvement or look for a better place to rest. Just rest the mind where it is and just as it is. In the Mahamudra meditation, it isn't sufficient just to recognize the presence of thoughts or emotions. This is the difference between this and ordinary meditation that you're taught in Meditation 101. In Mahamudra meditation, it isn't sufficient just to recognize the presence of thoughts and emotions. That's shamatha. We need to recognize their true nature and to rest within that experience. Its luminous nature, the fact that it's filled with awareness, its emptiness nature, the fact that you really can't touch anything that's there like that, okay? And finally, that it is totally empty. There's really nothing there that you can touch. From time to time in meditation, reflect on the three basic characteristics of the mind: emptiness, clarity, and awareness. I hope I got the three that I just enumerated. That's what the mind is, not its characteristics, what the mind is. This emptiness of the mind is something we can see, so to speak, or you can experience. When you look in the mind, it's like infinite space. It has no limit. It has no material form or color or shape. There's nothing we can touch. And in that space, that openness, that itself is the empty nature of the mind. When contemplating the mind's emptiness, experience the spacious, insubstantial, non-material quality of the mind. Experience the changing and substantial and empty nature of your perceptions, sensations, thoughts, and emotions. I gave you 3 little notes that I've been taught myself, that I practice extensively. Every time you notice that you're having an experience, you're actually at that point what they call SEM, or you're in the conceptual mind, just drop it. In fact, I recommend whatever you've got, right, just, here's my beads, drop it. Whatever, don't fixate after experience. Whatever's going through your mind, just drop it. Just be the space. Be the crystal ball, which I haven't talked about. Be the crystal ball where all these things are happening within. Leave the mind in a state of ease and total openness. The mind is not just empty, however. It also has a vivid clarity, an infinite and vast luminosity, which is the radiance of the emptiness itself. It's like a wide, clear sky filled with light. This experience of space with light is the experience of great compassion and loving kindness. It's the unbiased, great love beyond concepts, it's bodhicitta. It manifests in the vibrant energy of thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. We can see it in every experience of the mind, especially in the powerful display of our emotions. Everything, if you want to get theistic about it, everything is a display of this God's energy. Everything. You didn't come up with it. You are simply part of it. You're part of the display. The display is not you. You were part of the display. So every time that you want things, you go, oh, I should be doing that. Just acknowledge it, okay, and just drop it. Abide and be. Contemplate the clarity aspect of mind. Look directly at whatever forms, thoughts, or emotions arise. They are all the natural expression of this luminous nature. Look beyond the object and experience the radiance of emptiness. It's radiant because all of this stuff manifests. Form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Remember, that's the core of the Mahayana. We are emptiness form. This is it. This is us. We are one of the aspects of it, but it is, in a sense, larger than us. We're not dreaming it up. It's dreaming us up. The clarity aspect of mind has the power of knowing, seeing, and experiencing the world. See? All of this shows up. When a room is full of light, we can see all the objects surrounding us. And in the same way, the light of our mind makes appearances clear and distinct. When we think about an object, our mind naturally produces an image for it. Whatever experience or feeling or image that we experience is an expression of the mind's clear, playful, joyous, creative energy. And I just made a note. This is the great perfection. How could you, what would be, the only reason you want to change anything about it or add something to it is because of taha, because of your illusory desires for things which aren't there, but everything's there. How could anything not be there? You know, everything, you're aware of everything. How could you be aware of something if it weren't there? The mind is not only empty and clear, it has the quality of panoramic and discriminating awareness. While clarity is the compassionate aspect of mind, awareness is the wakeful aspect. It is the sharp, penetrating intelligence, prajna, that sees through any confusion and is perfectly understand the world it sees. With clarity and awareness together, we experience the full power and benefit of compassion and wisdom of our lives. How could we be mad at our president when we realize the president and we are part of the same reality? Mutually empty, luminous awareness. We may have things that make us mad, but it's all right. The president gets mad at us. So, it's okay. It's okay. With awareness, we experience the three aspects of mind in union and the wholeness of the mind's nature. When we hear instructions to meditate on the mind or to rest in the mind's true nature, it is this union of emptiness, clarity, and awareness. When we are able to rest in this nature without too much stress from trying too hard or focus or concentrate, then we begin to experience genuine relaxation. Instead of genuine relaxation, which is kind of a Mahamudra way of talking about it, I'll use the Indians, but you experience total bliss. It's a sense of supreme well-being, joyous acceptance of the joys and the sorrows of this life. Joyous acceptance. That's a Joseph Campbell expression for it. Relaxing in this space is one of the most powerful meditations, leading to a direct experience of the Buddha mind. Because properly done, it is the Buddha mind. With this experience, we can bring a new level of understanding and skill into our everyday life. The Buddha mind is not something we make up or that comes and goes. It's always here. We just become aware of what's already here. The wisdom and compassion we manifest will transform this once disturbing energies of our thoughts and emotions into something very useful and powerful. By the way, that is the heart of the Vajrayana right now, is to transform negative into positive energies. This can bring about the experience of enlightenment. So, that's the end of the essay by Kunlap Rinpoche. Very wonderful. I have a little short left to read you. That's a lot to take in. It's many, many years of study. It's worth a lifetime of study. It's the whole banana, right? What he just talked about right there. It's the whole path. Okay. Not again. It's a lot to take in right now. It's worth the effort. Worth the effort. So, what are some other enlightened expressions? Well, That was all path Mahamudra. Mahamudra has a little bit more a program on how you examine your thoughts. They have like, is there, look at the nature of your thoughts. Are your thoughts moving or are they still? Look at the nature of your thoughts. Where did your thought go, the one you just had? Look at it has a series of instructions that systematically directs you to look at the nature of mind. Dzogchen is a very similar form of teaching that's a little bit more open-ended, a little bit more direct. Okay, it doesn't have quite as much structure to it, although there's not much structure in Mahamudra, but it has the same goal. Dzogchen means the great perfection of the great completion. It's part of the traditions of teaching the Tibetan Buddhism that are aimed at discovering and continuing in the natural and primordial state of being. It's a central teaching of the Nyingma school, the school of the elders, the original teachings of Tibetan Buddhism. It's infused with Bon elements. That's the shamanistic religion of Old Tibet. So there's a lot of ritual and magic in part of Dzogchen too. Which, by the way, we Americans, I don't tend to follow the ritual and magic because it's fun, but I don't know, I wasn't raised in that culture. In these traditions, Dzogchen is the highest and most definitive path of the 9 vehicles to liberation. Dzogchen takes basically the Hinayana teachings, the Mahayana teachings, the Vajrayana teachings, and the Dzogchen teachings, and it sort of orders it into a series of 9 vehicles or levels of understanding. Oh. Dzogchen teachings were brought to Tibet by a great Indian Mahasiddha that's sort of considered the founder of the Nyingma school, called the Padmasambhava, or Guru Rinpoche. That picture that I put there, I haven't shown you many pictures, that is a statue in Tibet which is considered, I don't know if it's true, was supposed to be more or less contemporaneous with Padmasambhava, and somebody told me that he considered it a good likeness, but there he is with his wide open eyes. Remember, that's the way you practice Dzogchen or Mahamudra meditation, with your eyes open, not with your eyes half shut, okay? And he's sitting in, again, I've had friends who visited this shrine with this statue in it I think it's in Nepal, I'm not sure where it is. It's synonymous with Ati Yoga, which is almost a different word for it. Very similar to the Mahamudra tradition. Both teachings share the same goals and fruition. But I consider Dzogchen a little bit more direct and simple, and it is radical, simple, and unadorned. So I'm going to read you, what is Dzogchen meditation about? I would hesitate almost to try to describe it. It seems all, well, I'm going to let Delpa Khyentse Rinpoche, considered as being one of the supreme masters in the lineage, a great, great teacher. And I've studied with people who've studied with Gyalpo Khyentse. He was the teacher of teachers. Many of the great, highly realized beings in the Tibetan tradition. So this is his writing. Is my meditation correct? And when shall I ever make progress? I'll never obtain the level of my spiritual master. Juggled between hope and doubt, our mind is never at peace. And according to our moods, one day we'll practice intensely, and then the next day not at all. We're attached to agreeable experiences which emerges from the state of mental calm, but we wish to abandon meditation when we fail to slow down the flow of our thoughts. That's not the right way to practice. We've all been there, but that's not the way to practice. Whatever our state of our thoughts may be, we must apply ourselves steadfastly to regular practice day after day. We practice by observing the movement of our thoughts and tracing them back to their source. We should not count on being immediately capable of maintaining the flow of our concentration day and night. When we begin to meditate on the nature of mind, it's even preferable to make short sessions of meditation several times a day. By short, he means 45 minutes or something, several times a day. With perseverance, we'll progressively realize the nature of our mind, and that realization will become more stable. At this stage, thoughts will have lost their power to disturb us and to subdue us. Emptiness is the ultimate nature of the Dharmakaya, the absolute body, and it's not a simple nothingness. It possesses intrinsically the faculty of knowing all phenomena. This faculty is the luminous or the cognitive aspect of the Dharmakaya, whose expression is spontaneous. The Dharmakaya is not a product of causes and conditions. It's the original nature of the mind. Recognition of this primordial nature resembles the rising of sun of ignorance, the sun of wisdom in the night of your ignorance. The darkness is instantly dispelled. The clarity of the Dharmakaya does not wax and wane like the moon. It's more like the immutable light which shines at the center of the sun. Whatever clouds gather, the nature of the sky is not corrupted. And when they disperse, it's not ameliorated. The sky does not become more or less or more vast. It does not change. And it's the same with the nature of mind. It's not spoiled by the arrival of your thoughts, and it's not improved by their disappearance. The nature of mind is emptiness. Its expression is clarity. And the two aspects are essentially one's simple images designed to indicate the diverse modalities of the mind. I'm running short on time, but that wonderful image you saw right there is Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri. That is a tantric Vajrayana depiction of what the nature of the mind is about. Samantabhadra is that blue figure right there, represents the Dharmakaya, okay, the absolute nature of the mind, but it's inseparable from its luminosity, from its expression. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. That's the female deity, Samantabhadri. They are conjoined in sacred intercourse. They are experiencing great bliss, okay, which is the experience. That's what the experience of this union of clarity and the naturally empty nature of mind. It's actually what self-awareness is. The awareness nature of the mind is bliss. Properly experienced, it's bliss. And that is why this graphic, the Europeans freaked when they saw these things, but they are so profound what these things mean. Why did they choose a figure in two figures in this having intercourse? It is, for most of us, the blissful union. It's close to we come to this blissful union. Okay? It would be useless to attach oneself in turn to the notion of emptiness and then to that of clarity, as if they were independent entities. The ultimate nature of mind is beyond all concepts and all definition and all fragmentation. If I could just walk on clouds as a child, but if the child reached the clouds, they would find there's no place to place your feet. Likewise, if you don't examine your thoughts, they seem very solid. They present a solid appearance. But as soon as you recognize them or examine them, there's really nothing there. Can't encourage you guys enough to practice meditation and realize that you aren't the victim of your thoughts. They aren't real. This is what is called being at the same time empty and apparent. Emptiness of mind is not a nothingness, nor is it a state of torpor. It possesses by its very nature a luminous faculty of knowledge, which is called awareness. These two aspects, emptiness and awareness, cannot be separated. They are essentially one. The mirror, like the surface of a mirror and the image which is reflected in it. Thoughts manifest themselves within this emptiness and then are reabsorbed in it. They actually never are apart from emptiness. Like a face appears and disappears in a mirror. The face has never been in the mirror, and when it ceases to be reflected in it, it has not ceased to exist. The mirror itself has never changed. That face has never actually been in the mirror. It appeared in the mirror. It's part of the mirror's nature to reflect a face, but the face and the mirror are not separate. It's the function of the mirror or the mind to reflect. Everything's an empty appearance. That's my, and the image I love, I wish I had more time, is the mind's nature is like a crystal, and I have this on my altar, and behind it, the photograph, I have one right back there, behind this, the photograph there is a candle flame. It looks perfectly real and solid. The candle flame is burning. You can see it, but it's not there. It's just reflected light in the body of the crystal. It's not really there, but it appears to be there. Nature of mind. So before departing on the spiritual path, we remain in the so-called impure state of samsara, which in appearance is governed by ignorance. When we commit ourselves to that path, we cross a state where ignorance and wisdom are mixed. I'm in that state. And at the end, at the moment of enlightenment, only pure wisdom exists. But all the way along this spiritual journey, although there is the appearance of transformation, the nature of the mind itself has never changed. It was not corrupted by our entry into the path, and it's not improved by our realization. Very important to understand. We're not even doing it. Mind is doing this. We're an image within the crystal. There is M.C. Escher. We're an image inside the crystal of the mind. That's a self-luminous awareness, the crystal. And within that is a whole drama of a human life. The infinite and inexpressible qualities of primordial wisdom, the true nirvana, are inherent in our mind. It's not necessary to create them or to fabricate anything new. Spiritual realization only serves to reveal them through purification, which is what the whole spiritual journey is. It's all about purification. That's the path. If one considers them from an ultimate point of view, these qualities are themselves only emptiness. That old adage we've heard before, we go through all of these changes, do all these things, we realize we were back right where we were. We're like Dorothy. We were asleep in the bed all the time. All that stuff happened. Remember at the end of Dorothy, she looks down and she says, how can I get back to Kansas? And the good witch says, well, you could have gone anytime you wanted to. She said, but how do I do it? I want to be back in Kansas. She would not have gotten to that point of wisdom had she not gone through all of that journey of the yellow brick road. Okay? And I love The Wizard of Oz. I think it is a Dharma movie. It is a story of the path to wisdom. Thus, samsara is emptiness, and nirvana is emptiness. And so, consequently, one is not bad or the other good. The person who's realized the nature of mind is freed from the impulsion to reject samsara and to obtain nirvana. You don't even care anymore. You're like a young child who contemplates the world with an innocent simplicity, without any concept of beauty or ugliness, or good or evil. You're no longer the prey of conflicting tendencies, the source of desires and aversions. It doesn't serve any purpose to worry about the disruptions of daily life, like another child who rejoices on building a sandcastle and cries when it collapses. See how childish, puerile beings rush into all these difficulties, like a butterfly that plunges into the flame of a lamp, and so as to appropriate what they want and to covet and to get rid of what we hate. Why not better to put down the burden which all these they're all imaginary attachments bring about to bear upon one? Put it all down. The state of Buddha contains itself 5 bodies or aspects of Buddhahood: the manifested body, the body of perfect enjoyment, the absolute body, the essential body, and the immutable diamond body. These are not to be sought outside of us. They're inseparable from our own being, from the mind. And as soon as we've recognized this present, there's an end to confusion. We have no further need to seek enlightenment outside of ourselves. It's like a navigator who lands on an island made entirely of fine gold. You don't find a single nugget, no matter how hard you search, because you don't find good or bad things because everything's fine. There's no enlightenment or ignorance anymore. Everything is just aspect of mind. We must understand that all the qualities of the Buddha has always existed inherently in our being. One last one. This is a great, great teacher, Dzogchen Rinpoche. I never met him in this life, but I've studied with teachers. He was for many years the abbot or the head of the Nyingma order. His poetry is very profound. So I'm going to finish with this one. And it's a beautiful poem, and it's a poem of enlightenment. And if you like it, great. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. And if you get on the path, it will mean more and more and more to you the farther you go on the path. So Dudjom Rinpoche's hard advice for fortunate disciples. Part of it's couched the traditional way a great Tibetan master would express themselves. How amazing! In Tibetan, they say, Emaho! Emaho! Your present naked awareness, unspoiled by thoughts of past or present or future, not fettered by a mind grasping after so-called meditation, and nor falling into a pervasive blankness of what's called non-meditation. This natural state, nakedly sustained, it's the practice of the great perfection. Regardless of what thoughts arise during that practice, to reject negative ones or false or positive ones, it's unnecessary. Mere recognition liberates them into their own ground. Take this liberation upon arising as the path's key point. Destroy whatever meditative experiences arise and relax. A tantric practitioner without fixation is deeply content. You've reached the goal of contentment right now. What is the use of numerous enumerations of the Buddha's teachings? When you discover the Buddha Kungsan Zampo, that means wisdom mind, Kungsan Zampo within yourself. Keep the meaning of these words close to your heart. That very succinctly is the whole path, the whole thing. And it's a diamond. And all of us, we stumble through it. We thought it was just a pebble. It's the whole thing. We were looking for a big palace of gold, and it's right here. So that's an image of Alice in the Looking Glass. And Alice is right there discovering the fundamental nature of a reality, that everything is a mere appearance. She is going to shortly be, she can't tell what's real and what's not real. Everything is real, but its own apparent reality. So she's going through the looking glass of Buddhism. The looking glass specifically is Dzogchen. And she's discovering her true nature, that everything is her true nature. Everything happens to her within a mere appearance. So that's unbelievable. It's exactly 3 o'clock. This has been a very big journey. I'm grateful to those of you who might still be here with me. Sorry we had that little power outage in the middle of it. I'm afraid we probably lost the first part of that talk. Maybe it wasn't necessary. The heart of it is Dzogchen. Dzogchen is something that's deeply moving to me. Don't worry if it's not something that appeals to you at all. The different phases of the path in Buddhism, you have to go through all the states of the Buddhism. You have to do it all, and it all happens naturally. The only thing you have to do is continue to do it, to resolve to do it. I hate to tell you this, but the other path, the path of samsara, the path of the usual dualistic consciousness, will just keep you, you'll do this and that for the rest of your life, and I pray that you'll die in your beds. But you aren't going to gain great wisdom. To gain wisdom, you have to go through these things. It might be slightly different in another spiritual tradition, but this is the real dope. Okay? So, Dzogchen I consider the culmination of the whole path. And there is an enormous literature. I would love to read more from it, but you will find that these spiritual teachings are self-secret. You'll read a passage of it, and it'll become incredibly luminous to you. Somebody else will read it, and it'll mean nothing to them. You'll pick up, like the Bible, and you'll find a passage in the Bible, oh my God, almost by magic. Then you'll go looking for it later, and it seems to have disappeared. If you get serious about practicing this, the whole path becomes quite magical. Something's taking care of us, and it's because we aren't who we think we are. We're vast beings. We're all of it. We're the Dharmakaya, and we don't know that. And something's working through us. This is all happening through us. We are here really to allow awakening. We are the vehicles for awakening. We are the beings that become aware of being aware. All right? So I hope these talks have helped you a little bit in your journeys, if you stuck it out this far. If not, I'm sorry about that, and I sincerely hope you will find something it does. I think this stuff is so important because I think it's the only stuff that matters. I think it's the quote, from Gone with the Wind, it's the only thing that matters because it's the only thing that lasts, right? That was Scarlett O'Hara's, I think, father. I'm talking about Tara. It's the only thing that matters because it's the only thing that lasts. So I'm going to try to make these teachings, the recordings, such that I have available to you all, and I will put the PowerPoint demonstration up online. I hope I've encouraged you in your practice of meditation. If you don't meditate, take up meditation. If you're in the early stages of meditating, keep with it, please. And for you advanced sadhakas out there, the ones who practice for many years, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. So this is Jeff Carr, and this is for the Chenrezig Tibetan Buddhist Center, and I hope I can see all of you soon in the future. So we dedicate the merit for this and all other spiritual discussions, all other spiritual practices, any benefit that we might have created for ourselves. We dedicate it to all of the alleviation of suffering and ignorance for all beings in all periods through all time and space. We dedicate the merit that we've achieved through this practice towards their liberation, their well-being, their happiness. So be it. And I'll see you next time. And let's see if I can stop the video.